My name is Christopher Wilton Steer. I'm the head of communications at the Aga Khan Foundation in the UK. Welcome to today's talk entitled Trade, Heritage and Landscape Along the Silk Roads. This talk is part of a series complementing the Aga Khan Foundation's current outdoor exhibition in King's Cross, London, entitled The Silk Road, A Living History. Today's session with Professor Stéphane Pradines, Professor Roland Lin, and Professor Michael Jansen will discuss the Silk Roads and networks between Asia, Africa, and Europe. The experts will focus primarily on the land and maritime routes in Central Asia and the Indian Ocean. With some historical and archaeological examples, they will show how emporiums, city-states, thalassocracies were created around commercial networks. The panelists will develop the idea of intangible heritage along the Silk Roads, and they will share their experience of how to preserve and promote heritage. The main questions the speakers will try to answer are how to identify heritage, preserve and promote sites and monuments. What are the challenges for archaeologists and heritage architects around conservation and sustainable development? And what are the NGO and international organizations such as Unesco doing to support nations, cultures, identities and territories through the World Heritage List? And finally, what kind of opportunities are created and developed by being part of Silk Road heritage? Professor Roland Lin is a city planner and art historian. He's currently project officer of the Asia Pacific unit of the World Heritage Center at UNESCO and is in charge of managing Asian heritage, cultural landscape and Silk Road safeguarding projects. Michael Jansen is Professor Emeritus at RWTH Aachen University in Germany and Professor of History of Urbanization, Conservation and Heritage Management at the German University of Technology in Oman. And Stéphane Pradines is an archaeologist and Professor of Islamic Art and Architecture at the Aga Khan University Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations in London. Before I hand over to Stéphane to get us started for a talk that will last around 40 minutes, please note that the session is being recorded and will be available via Aga Khan University's and Aga Khan Foundation's digital channels in the coming days. This talk will be followed by a Q&A, so as questions arise, please do type them into the Q&A box below so that we're ready to go when that section starts. Stéphane, over to you.
Thank you, Christopher. So good afternoon, good morning, or even good evening to all. We are here today to present and discuss our personal experiences about Silk Road's heritage. So I hope that our experience will be interesting for the public here, or at least not too boring. We will speak about the Silk Roads and not a unique Silk Road, as it is very often presented for the general public. In fact, we have many Silk Roads, not only one kind of medieval highway from Asia to Europe, but we have different Silk Roads, not only terrestrial by land, but also maritime. We have maritime roads in the Indian Ocean, long time called spice roads. We have also a combination of terrestrial and maritime Silk Roads, as you can see on this map. Rivers were used to circulate between land and sea. These trading networks were not continuous, but more like little fleet jumps, small travels between fixed points. On the sea, islands, and in the desert, oases played the same role. Protective stopovers, caravanserai, providing shelter, food, and fresh water to the travelers. Fixed points were not only small stopovers, but sometimes powerful city-states and emporia created along the Silk Roads. About the Silk Road networks, they were not something static. In fact, as my colleague Michael says, we have to talk about roads in motion. In movement, sites appear and disappear according to different trading networks, merchants, fashion, and consumption. We have to think at the Silk Roads in synchrony with sites from the same period, and in the diachrony with changes through times with new roads, new actors of the play. Silk Road's heritage are also dynamic between people, cultures, and sites, with material culture, objects, monuments, sites, and also intangible heritage, music, ideas, traditions, religions such as Buddhism, Islam, and Christianism. So my first question to Roland are very basic. Do we have only silk or other products traded along the Silk Roads? What is the Silk Road? Is it a modern invention? And what is today the Silk Road narration?
Thank you, Professor Stéphane Pradines. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening for those who are not based in Paris. If I may say firstly, because this is the first time I speak, thank you and my honor to talk here with you. If we go back to my slide, firstly, I want to thank you Aga Khan Foundation and Aga Khan University to organize this webinar. And I'm talking with you together with Professor Stéphane Pradines and Professor Michael Jansen as my capacity of 25 years working in UNESCO headquarters, particularly recent year for World Heritage issues for Asia Pacific and for Silk Road. In another hand, as for general public and scholars and the researcher and the experienced conservation architect, I'm talking also some scientific and scholar approach. On the slide, you can see from 1988, UNESCO has launched already a 10-year program entitled Integrated Study of the Silk Road, Role of Dialogue, together with 5 expeditions about the could be several expeditions, sea road, desert road, steppe road, and Buddhism road. It come out with the scientific publication like 6 volumes of Central Asia civilization. Today, I want to emphasize what Professor Pradines raised question. The Silk Road are roots of integration, exchange, and dialogue, not only between East and West. It could be also between North and South. They contribute greatly to common prosperity of human civilization, as mentioned in 1988, 10 years integrated study. Here today, I want to emphasize, although there are some discussion, but still globally, we still consider the terminology was used by the German geographer Richard Toffen in 1877, and then the first publication using the Silk Road as a book publication by the Swedish geographer Sven Hedin in 1938. From my point, what I want to emphasize again is this Silk Road is not only great monuments, but also they reflect the landscape. They reflect the life of ordinary people, system of power, patronage, machinery of defense. To some extent, we will follow, explore what's the importance of this Silk Road heritage site. It could be mountain paths, which unfortunately are not preserved or identified by many national authorities as heritage. This could be water management system in Iran, in Turkmenistan, in Kazakhstan, in western part of China, Xinjiang Autonomous Region. The water management system cannot is still living. This is also part of important typology, diversity of Silk Road heritage site. Now I want to also emphasize that not only tangible heritage in most national law, particularly in Asia, the cultural heritage is divided into movable and immovable, tangible and intangible. But for Silk Road, thanks to the global interest and research, the contemporary society, Silk Road heritage could be found in all forms. It could be tangible heritage monument, group of building site, historical site, traditional villages. It could be natural heritage setting, important biological, geological formation. It could be intangible heritage, living tradition, oral history, festival. It could be museum collection, as we understand more and more archaeological finding, important historical painting object. It could be traditional craft, folklore art, like in French term, art premier. It could be documentary, archive, and heritage. And in the contemporary time, this creativity as heritage, cultural expression, cultural creativity, particularly in this modern technology. So the idea of heritage in all its form, we try to understand no one, no community beyond. We call for let no heritage, no culture behind. So our suggestion is whether it's a good momentum to understand heritage in all form, to heritage of Silk Road narration, how to better identify, understand, document, interpret, and propose a comprehensive process of Silk Road heritage narration. So I put this forward as the first point. I turn back to the chair, Professor Stéphane. Hope it's clear for you.
Thank you, Professor Roland. I would like now to ask one question to Michael about the new actors of the Silk Roads in the Indian Ocean. Could you give us maybe 2 examples of tentative of hegemonies over the maritime Silk Roads by Asians and Europeans?
Thank you very much, Stéphane and Roland, for this wonderful introduction. Let me have a very short comment on Roland's explanations. We have trade, heritage, and landscape, of course. And as we see, trade is the one which is a dynamic form of networks in motion, while heritage and landscape are local phenomena. And here we understand the complexity of this wonderful phenomenon, which we call Silk Roads, of course, a term which is a substitute for trade connections, both to land and to water. And here we see this wonderful ship, the flagship of Admiral Zheng He, around 1430, who came from China to conquer, or not to conquer, to explore the Indian Ocean world, and he reached up to Africa 70 years before the Portuguese, Vasco da Gama, in 1497 discovered the sea route to India around the Cape of Good Hope, around Africa. And here we are, that we see the enormous potentials behind this Indian Ocean area on the one side, but parallel to it also to the Central Asian land routes as we can see them on the map. Both together are an explanation for almost 2,000 years of connectivity, of exchange, not only, as was mentioned before, in material culture, like food, silk, where the name comes from, but also thoughts, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, especially through Central Asia to China and Japan. Here we are at the beginning of a wonderful analysis, and we will give you more examples like spotlights on what we are talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. So my second question to Roland is about what is for you and the UNESCO the concepts of cultural landscapes, heritage routes, and also the idea, the notion of heritage corridors. Could you tell us more about these points, Roland?
Thank you, Stéphane. Yes, as mentioned in the first point, the diversity of typology of Silk Road about heritage has enlarged our understanding to identify, document, and preservation of cultural heritage. If we can go through positive evolution of a heritage concept about three categories: cultural landscape, cultural roads, and heritage corridor. You can see on the left of your slide this important iconic heritage site in Bhutan, Parotasan, is also translated well-known Tiger Nest Temple. The building itself, important structure, Buddhist structure, they say built from 11th century and then rebuilt in 15th century and renovated in 1861 until the more recent 1998. Unfortunately, there was a disaster of fire. This settlement building was in very impressive cliff of 3,120 meters. Not only this building, together with the other stupa and temple, together with the different geographical features like holy water, cave, stone, and tree, all are honored by venerable in 8th century Guru Rinpoche, who is regarded by Tibetan Buddhism as the second Lord Buddha. So all together, this interaction of human creation between humankind and its natural environment, the combined work of nature and man as this tiger nest is what we call cultural landscape. So this is the new concept, how to preserve this monument, this setting, this spiritual for cultural landscape as ensemble. If I may to talk about the second concept of cultural root, if you see on the middle button, you have this important Isikul in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan. You have the river, you have the mountain, you have this yurt, traditional living, nomad living. As we know, according to scientific identification, in current Kyrgyzstan, there are two roads connected to eastern part, Chinese Xinjiang Autonomous Region, Kashgar, through the Tianshan Mountain on the south, over through the upper Fergana Valley. All this exchange, north, south, east, and west, is linked to, again, this by space, by time. This is what we call importance of a cultural road. The concept of cultural road is how to identify and, if possible, preserve and make a good interpretation of movement of idea of exchange, continuity or changement in space and time, with purpose that religious, commercial, administrative, or other function can be understood and transmitted for the future generation. So this is what we call cultural road. It's a new typology of heritage preservation. If we go to the upper middle one, the Merv, the great Kizikala, or we call it the Maritime Castle. This is impressive earthen structure. It was believed to be built in 8th or 9th century. This earthen structure, we can still see its general form and many details of architectural wall are still visible. Two-story of castle with very rectangular platform with sloping side are very impressive as building. But not only is important as building, is within the complex of Merv oasis cities along the Silk Road. Together with cultural landscape, an exceptional variety of culture of these oasis cities of Merv, along the river oasis, this has been continually interaction and constantly developed, linking east to current Uzbekistan, Samarkand, and Bukhara, over to Tajikistan, currently Panjikent. All this, I want to emphasize, under cultural roots, this important heritage corridor has been put forward as MERV, putting into consideration. UNESCO is providing technical assistance, particularly with Central Asian, 5 Central Asian countries, together with China, to put forward this heritage corridor approach. And this approach has been adopted by the Coordination Committee for Silk Road Transnational and Serial World Heritage Nomination along Silk Road in 2011 in Ashgabat during the second Silk Road Coordination Committee. So this cultural landscape, cultural role, heritage corridor are put forward with these 3 slides. Of course, Bamiyan in Afghanistan, important World Heritage cultural landscape site, together with 2 Buddha statues, but also with interaction, nature and culture as cultural landscape along the Silk Road, together with important Islamic remains like Sharigogura or Kakak, or 8 component site as cultural landscape and as cultural root. I believe we will have an occasion later on, maybe by Professor Michael Jansen, to talk more about Bamiyan cultural landscape. So for me, this cultural landscape, cultural role, heritage corridor, new concept of heritage in line with the typology and diversity of heritage along the Silk Road is really momentum. So thank you. I pass floor to Stéphane.
Thank you, Roland. So my question, in fact, to Michael is, do you have an example in your long career of these heritage corridors between cultures and countries? And I know that you work in between Pakistan and Oman, so maybe you have something about it.
Yes, thank you, Stéphane, with great pleasure. I will comment later on Bamiyan, where we have been working for almost 20 years. And here you see the satellite image of the city of Mohenjodaro. It is in the northwest Indian area of today Pakistan. It was one of the largest UNESCO programs, which was carried out between 1979 and 1997 to save this largest city of the 3rd millennium of the Bronze Age of the world, larger than Uruk, Ur, and also cities in Egypt, to save that against destruction by waterlogging salts and so on. And you see another danger here. It is the river Indus, which comes very close to the city, and UNESCO launched a campaign to protect it against the flooding by spurs, which take off the Indus River from the side. This Indus civilization, and it may be interesting for you, next year we celebrate the 100 years of the discovery of this very famous city, was, I would say, it the earliest one of Silk Road conceptions, because the Indus Valley people had shipping contacts with Mesopotamia, Bahrain, but also with Oman. That means here we have the first appearance of maritime expansion from the riverine system and from the rivers themselves of Northwest India to the Western world. A cultural landscape, of course, is it today because the government tries to include it in a wider setting of the historic conception of this Northwest Indian area. More than 200,000 sites have been discovered. And what is important today, we neither can read the script, it is still undeciphered, nor we have any palace or temple, indicating that here we may have had the first, we call it very carefully, proto-democratic political systems. And here you see the enormous width of Silk Road thinking, talking about heritage and landscapes, how they all are interfered in a time-space relation where changes always took place from not only one area to another one, but also from different historic periods. So you see now the Indus Valley and the place of Mohenjodaro inside, along with the sea trading route to the Arabian Peninsula, and also here Muscat, but also continuing further through the Strait of Hormuz to Mesopotamia. Here we have another example of the integration, as Roland said before, into new ways of thinking about the values of cultures dealing with relationships with each other, with conflicts, but also with harmony, to exchange, of course, goods and ideas amongst this enormous space of what we call the Indian areas and the Silk Road conceptions between East and West. Thank you very much, Stéphane.
Thank you, Michael. And I would like to add another example, an African example. Here you can see on this map the Indian Ocean roads. And this example with the African example with the Swahili coast in East Africa, from Kenya to Tanzania, Mozambique, Comoros, and Madagascar, and to talk or to introduce the idea of maritime heritage. So the idea of Silk Road heritage, but also maritime heritage, people connected by the sea. And what is interesting is to see that, of course, people traded, objects on these Silk Roads. And you can see Chinese ceramics, Chinese celadon, or Persian hatchet graffiato coming from Iran, and rock crystal from Madagascar, Malagasy rock crystal exported up to Cairo and Baghdad. So you can see that it was a kind of world community. People exchange objects, and they sent, these objects like ceramics, but also printed textile, silk, embroideries, sometimes ribbons, glass beads to East Africa, and in return, people, Africans exported raw materials such as ivory, rock crystal, and gold. You can see on the next slide that also what is interesting in it's to see what the people did with these objects coming from the Silk Road. You can see that, for example, that the Chinese ceramics, like such as the blue and white porcelain, were used in the mihrab, the niche that you can see to the left in Kua, Tanzania, to ornate, to decorate the mihrab of the mosque, but also in the house, like in this late 19th century house in Lamu, northern Kenya. Chinese ceramics, they were exposed, in the most prestigious room, of the palace or the house of the Waungwana, the noble family. So you can see that what is interesting also is to look at Silk Road heritage and maritime heritage through not only through objects, but also through function and consumption. So now I will have my third question to Roland, and this question is about people, nations, and minorities. What is, in fact, it's a very simple question. What is the World Heritage List? And more difficult, what and why do we have cultural identities, and how these concepts can help to identify cultures, people, and territories?
Thank you, Stéphane, for your question. And what I want to emphasize in line with your question is whether we can take the good momentum as a good opportunity, World Heritage Convention as a Silk Road heritage preservation positively in line with what we are talking today. Before talking into the momentum and the framework, I want to emphasize UNESCO taking to good opportunity to put and address the gap of underrepresented category of World Heritage, as I just mentioned, cultural landscape, cultural roots, or heritage corridor, and also in some area, particularly in Central Asia, in South Asia, or as you mentioned, Stéphane, in Africa region. So the idea is to recognize through this process the good momentum and respect cultural diversity, whether we can demonstrate mutual exchange and mutual benefit for protection of cultural heritage along Silk Road. And this maybe contribute toward intercultural dialogue and mutual understanding. On the slide, you can see the new logo of the UNESCO World Heritage Convention that we sincerely hope this process can provide national policy support, can design some guidance of methodology, can provide some capacity building, training, and monitoring issue, and call for international cooperation platform. As you may be aware, UNESCO, besides World Heritage activities, they are important Silk Road program to put the Silk Road document research online. I here encourage the scholars or the institution who are working about Silk Road may be willing to share your knowledge. More specifically, in line with the potential transnational World Heritage Silk Road nomination, we are trying to work under request of countries. For example, China from 2003, they are trying to do some identification of Silk Road heritage. 5 Central Asia, 2005 in Almaty, they put forward Silk Road World Heritage nomination as regional priority. Together, 5 Central Asia and China, they come out under the guidance of UNESCO, a concept note how to put forward together this idea. In 2009, in Almaty again, and then in Xi'an, the very first International Coordination Committee of Silk Road has been established. The first meeting was held in Xi'an, China, together with the Secretariat E-commerce International Center in Xi'an, IIC Xi'an, as Secretariat. And after all, I have mentioned about Heritage Corridor Agreement in Ashgabat 2011, the very first and the only transnational Silk Road nomination by China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. Silk Road Tianshan Chang'an Corridor was successfully inscribed in 2014 in Doha with 33 component sites. We call for this potentially international cooperation. But for this, it's not easy task because we need local community, local authority, national authority, international authority to work together with scientists. Many of our participants here today, they are scientists. This interdisciplinary approach to understand more heritage issue relating to history, culture, people-centered society, together with territory approach. So this is what we are facing, but we have good opportunity, momentum. Whether based on this, UNESCO World Heritage Convention as a tool or a framework, we can call for reinforcement South cooperation. We can contribute this UN Sustainable Development Goal 2030, heritage in line for sustainable development. UN as a whole, UNESCO, the only cultural agency in UN system, we all look forward whether heritage culture can bring peace and development. So all this may be a good momentum and opportunity to identify, document, preserve, manage, and in order for further transmission, interpretation, presentation of Silk Road heritage site. Together with this, I hand over to Stéphane. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. And the same question for Michael. Do you have practical examples of cultural identities, World Heritage List, and territories? Over to you, Michael, but maybe your microphone, you are mute.
Yes, technology. Thank you, Stéphane. I show you here one example. It is Otratober in Kazakhstan. And let me just comment a little bit on Roland's comment. Of course, we have to understand that the Silk Road phenomenon is a modern one from the thinking of UNESCO and World Heritage, because we should not forget that in 1989, after the collapse of Afghanistan and the collapse of the Soviet political system, all these states like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan became independent, and they are till today trying to find their new old identity. And within this, of course, UNESCO, with this fantastic idea of world heritage, is not only dealing with national properties, and here I would use the heritage, but it is something which belongs to the world. And look at that wonderful structure of Otratober. It's the upper city, which from the city point of view, and I'm an urban historian, I was deeply impressed when we came there first. And it was the time where Roland discussed, it was around 90s, where through Japan Fund and Trust, UNESCO organized a conservation program where we were working for 6 years to consolidate the mud brick structures. Unfortunately, I do not have enough space to show you, but here we have a mosque which only came in after Genghis Khan in 1219, conquered this city, brought Islam, and also with this, of course, you have the Islamic world of Central Asia. So here a fascinating example, completely unknown in the Western world, on huge urban structures, which are, if we take the image of a network, Silk roads as networks of many roads, but not only roads, also knots. And here we have one knot, it's a city with the Emporium, with the caravanserai, where the trading systems ended to have protection and to exchange goods. So here we have Otratober as a wonderful example in Central Asia. Thank you very much. Back to Stéphane.
Thank you, Michael. So I would like to add one point about this topic in the next slide. I would like to mention the very important and specific role of Islamic civilizations, people, and monuments and sites along the Silk Roads. As you all know, the boom of the Silk Road started more or less during the Abbasid period, and it is connected to the Islamization of these regions. Trade supported Islam, and Islam supported trade through, for example, the Hajj, you know, the pilgrimage. It was a part of the travel and the trading networks. The Aga Khan Trust for Culture, based in Geneva, oversees different programs, including the Aga Khan Historic City Program. The Aga Khan Historic City Program works on the regeneration projects in historic areas in ways that spur social, economic, and cultural development. This was especially important in the Muslim world, which contained 1/3 of World Heritage sites, many of them in decline, sometimes destroyed, sometimes hidden behind commercial facade, others ignored. If something was not done, much of the cultural heritage of the Muslim world would have been lost. It's the reason why His Highness the Aga Khan launched, this project, this program. Next slide, please. Overall, the Aga Khan, the AKTC has worked on over 350 restoration and conservation projects in 11 countries, including 11 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and created 10 major parks and gardens, including the following Silk Road countries, such as Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Malaysia, Tanzania, Egypt, and Syria. And yes, and I have my last question for Roland. It's about, we had all this discussion, but for whom and who? So basically, which nations or NGO or Unesco are involved, in this program, and why do we have an heritage at risk? What does it mean? And how we can protect and manage the Silk Road heritage from the archaeological excavations to the conservation, the management, infrastructures, and also the sustainable development. Over to you, Roland.
Thank you, merci, Stéphane. If I may, we talk about the good momentum opportunity, but in the same time, we are facing challenges because if I just focus about land road of Silk Road, it represents already 35,000 kilometers as distance, and the area covering Silk Road, land road, traditional road is 18 million square kilometers, and some sensitive area is heritage site, cultural landscape, cultural route, or heritage corridor. They are facing human-made potential risk of challenge or natural disaster like earthquake, urbanism, abusive tourism, or some flooding, or some intentional destruction. But for this, it's not easy at all, and quite challenging, particularly for the archaeologists, the heritage architect for conservation. How we need to emphasize is how this theory, together with case studies, to call for interdisciplinary and inter-level collaboration. The challenge where we observe there is a value issue. The understanding of value of heritage along the Silk Road during this huge territory approach, how to understand the value. Where there is a good mechanism in law, by law, to manage efficient preservation and conservation. And there is a huge challenge of coordination, inter-administrative way, inter-authoritative locality, nation, and international. And there's a risk that more and more people are taking sustainable development for infrastructural development. So the resources, unfortunately, move more for infrastructure along Silk Road, which is really challenging. So the value identification and understanding, good mechanism, better coordination, and resource-oriented for cultural diversity, heritage approach. These are the challenges, but it's not easy. That's the reason why I want to emphasize again, from history, nature, culture, people, society, centered, and territory, interdisciplinary could be challenging. How this theory can put into practice for locality, for local community, whether sustainable development in front of infrastructural development could be put forward. We don't want like emergency rescue for archaeological site everywhere. We call for more heritage impact assessment, cultural landscape impact assessment in line with cultural nature sustainable development approach. But this theory is possible. How to put in practice is not easy at all. I believe Michael can use Bamiyan cultural landscape and Bamiyan cultural master plan as illustration what is the effort, but still very challenging. Floor to Stéphane. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. So, Michael, do you have an example of heritage at risk? And is it possible for you to say a few words about your conference on Silk Roads organized in 2022?
Thank you very much, Stéphane. Indeed, we have one very famous example of challenges and heritage at risk. I remember when I was with Michael Petzet, the president of ICOMOS in 2002, shortly after the destruction of the Buddhas. And you see on the right the empty niche of the Western Buddha, the larger one, 54 meters, and on the left side, the photo before this terrible event happened. We are now in a slightly sad part of the history of Silk Roads, namely conflicts and also attacks and war and whatever it is. And everybody does understand that if precious goods were moved from China to the Roman Empire at the beginning, crossing 6,000 kilometers, that there were many people who wanted to get hold of it. So defense of goods while traveling, but also conflicts amongst heritage partners, or not partners, but areas, is a traditional must. And if you look at the left Buddha, the larger one, look at the feet. Before the Taliban blew it up in 2001, Adil Shah, others already attacked these figures because they were thought to be pagan. The local people think they are a couple, a prince and a princess, and you see how history and imagination about heritage values are changing and adopted. Now, in 2003, shortly after Afghanistan was freed, UNESCO declared the Bormian Valley with the cultural landscape and the archaeological remains, Roland has already mentioned it, as a World Heritage directly at risk. And you see in the end of this cliff, you see the smaller Buddha niche. The larger one is difficult to see. It's about 800 meters to the left side, that means to the west. And you see this wonderful valley. Now, this is 5th, 6th century Buddhism, where Buddhism traveled through the Silk Road conceptions from India, from Nepal, to whole India, but also to the northwest to create the Gandhara culture, one of the most beautiful Buddhist expressions of art. And here you see the valley. And of course, the monks who had several monasteries here, they cultivated the land. And if you look at the cliffs, you see precisely where the water is ending. That means it's a barren, rocky area, 2,000 meters high. And here the monks bring in irrigation, agriculture, and you see still the valley is hardly disturbed by modern skyscrapers or urban expansion, all these challenges which were mentioned by Roland. And so still we are going on, and let us discuss the moment. We are fearing we are not yet ready with the conservation work at all. We are fearing very much that now with the new political situation, USA takes out the troops, Germany takes out the troops, what will be happening once the Taliban get more power? And you see the enormous dynamics and the relation between cultural tradition, heritage, iconoclasm. All these problems are, of course, a part of the Silk Roads, both to land and to water. And here we are with UNESCO. The world, with the new idea of the 1972 convention, has created world property. It's not the responsibility for only one nation. It is the responsibility for us, and Silk Roads are something wonderful which we have to protect. Back to Stéphane.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, and just to finish with the last slide, another example of heritage at risk, maritime heritage at risk, and the Indian Ocean cultures with the Maldives, because in fact the Maldives Islands are risk to disappear with the global warming and the sea rising. The main monuments of the Maldives are this coral mosque, as you can see here, and with the Maldivian government, the UNESCO, and the World Monument Fund, we are trying to add this mosque to the World Heritage list. And they are built generally not far from the sea, from the beach. and on the seafront. And of course, they are at risk with the global warming and the sea rise. And there is another point who is not very well known about this coral mosque, but known by the practitioner. It is sometimes very difficult to conciliate, conservation or protection of heritage, and historic monuments and ecology. Because nowadays, coral is protected. The corals are disappearing with the global warming. It's very difficult to use fresh coral or to use coral from the sea to restore this mosque, because these mosques are protected, but the coral is also protected. So I wanted to show you, the two faces of the same medal. It's a bit complicated, and it's what we have to face when we work on sites, between archaeologists and conservation architects. So I will give the floor to for the Q&A to Christopher, but I think, Michael, you wanted to mention maybe your conference in 2022.
Thank you. We have, and here I have to tell you that Professor Pradines and Professor Lin are, of course, members of the organizing committee. In March 22, next year, we will have an international conference in Oman, in the center of the Indian Ocean, trade, connectivity, and historicity on the Silk Roads to land and to sea. And we will send invitations for everybody in the world to contribute. You are invited to give papers where we hopefully on a wide range could discuss all these matters we have been thinking and talking about today in detail amongst all of others. So welcome to Oman in March 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to our wonderful speakers today. That was fascinating. I'm sorry we had a bit of a late start, so we're a little bit late in the Q&A. We have lots of questions. We won't be able to answer them all, so I'm going to choose three, and I think they will be directed at individuals. So I don't know, any of you can come in on this, but perhaps Michael, given you were just talking about Bamyan, this one might be good from Professor Fadwa El Gyundi. Groups holding views of intolerance to heritage and cultural difference mark our times. Do the speakers have evidence of how early such predatory movements threatened the harmony of the Silk Road? Michael or others, would you like to come in on that?
Can you repeat? I did not just get the point.
Okay, the point being that that intolerance to heritage and cultural difference has affected a lot of, has impacted a lot of the heritage on the Silk Roads, like Bamyan. Do you have evidence of this happening in the past, of this kind of iconoclasm,
yes,
or otherwise?
Yes, of course. That's a very good question. And here again, we have to look into the past. And I told one major change and event and influence, which was, of course, Genghis Khan. And I had another slide, which was Hoja Ahmed Yasavi, a Sufi saint in the 13th century, whose monument, again, World Heritage, of course, is in Turkestan, nowadays Kazakhstan. And he was the one who brought Islam to the whole world. So, of course, we can go much, much earlier. Yes, this one here. And you see a wonderful Timurid architecture, 1395. Under Timur, a monument not only for the strength of the spirit, but also of power, because you see in the niche, this balcony was where the Khans were proclaimed and where they met the audiences in front of this wonderful mausoleum. But we have it starting, of course, in the Roman times, and we have then in the 8th century, 8th, 9th, with the Abbasid, the conflicts between the East Roman Empire and the beginning of Islam. And you know, then later, 1453, Constantinople is conquered by the Turkish Empire, and the whole Islam is blocking up the Silk Road, and the whole Mediterranean economy, including Venice, is blocked, no chance anymore. This was the reason why Christoph Columbus tried to find the sea road to India. And you see how important political events within this flow of goods and thoughts for 2000 years always interfered and influenced the happenings both to land and to sea.
Thank you, Michael. One for Stéphane, perhaps, from Mohammed Banji. He says, 1,000 years ago, artisans in the Fatimid period were experts in working with rock crystal. Was rock crystal sourced from East Africa along the maritime routes?
Yes, of course. And I will invite you to look at a few articles that we published, about this topic. They are available, free and available online on academia or ResearchGate. So we trace the origin of the Fatimid rock crystal and probably the Abbasid rock crystal from Madagascar via Comoros and the Swahili coast, Kenya and Tanzania.
Thank you. And one for Roland, perhaps. China is trying to revive the Silk Road through its Belt and Road initiative. What kind of collaboration exists between UNESCO and any of these initiatives, if at all?
Well, as I mentioned, it's a good momentum since 1988. UNESCO called for the decade for integrated Silk Road study, which is not only proposing currently by China or by some country in Asia. For example, in Indonesia, we talk about shared heritage, which is important. In India, we talk about monsoon, this season wind, which are important. And also in Central Asia, they are talking about cultural identity, try to put forward different religious remains. So it's not easy. As the first point, Stéphane asked me to talk. We are facing the challenges, how heritage in front of potential infrastructure development, whether there's a preventive way or is inter-coordination way, not only international level, which, as I mentioned, UN system is working peace and development. In the same time, not only economical development, but also for sustainable development. I have worked quite extensively since these 7 years in Bhutan. Bhutan, they are putting in their updating national heritage law in preamble by saying Bhutan, whether can concept-wise, not by law, but concept, the whole territory as a cultural landscape, which is a brilliant concept, but in reality, it's not easy. So here I call for the international experts, scholars, institution like Aga Khan Foundation, like Aga Khan University, and many other. I saw many Nepalese, Bhutanese, Indian, and Chinese Central Asian colleagues are participating today's talk. So it's not easy. UNESCO is working for cultural education and science. For me, concern is heritage issue. We are facing the good momentum, but we are facing the challenge. The national policy from some country we must cope with, but in the same time, our core function, heritage valued, heritage protection mechanism, heritage inter-coordination mechanism, heritage resources need to be reinforced. So here, I didn't reply you directly the question, but the idea, the concept is totally very clear. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you, Roland. Right, maybe one or two more for Michael. What really distinguishes the Indus Valley from other civilizations?
That's another very exciting question. Of course, only once we do comparative studies, and that would be with Egypt and Mesopotamia, the difference comes out quite clear. We have developed what we call a triangular relation of power. If we take sacred power, belief, if we take elite power, which is kings and the elite and the people themselves. We have a very clear change from Egypt, where two powers are connected. It is the sacred power and the elite power. The pharaoh is god and king at the same time. The result is in the pyramid, where 20,000 people work 10 years to produce a monument for a single person. We have Mesopotamia, where in the beginning we have a kind of more balance of powers, but then under Sargon of Akkad, 2150, he builds the ziggurats, which again is enormous investment of labor for a single event, namely the marriage of the king with the goddess. That means monumentality. And when we go to the Indus Valley, we have neither palaces, nor we have temples. We even do not know which religion they had in those days, but we have big cities like Mohenjodaro, built for 80,000 people, according to latest calculations, with a drainage system, water supply, modern technology. And here we can see that every of the three earliest civilizations has a complete different behavior in relation to the distribution and the connection of the power triangle, sacred, elite, and profane.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think we'll have time for one last question. I'm going to direct it at Stéphane. Stéphane, you spoke a little bit about the exchange of goods around the Indian Ocean, and particularly the Swahili coast, from porcelain, etc. But there's a dark exchange of goods as well. And I wondered if you could, or a darker story there, isn't there? And I wondered if you could just unpack that a little bit.
Yes, thank you, Christopher. And in fact, it is also linked to one of the questions that I saw in the Q&A about the fact that about idealistic societies, because, and it's also linked to what Roland said, you know, about the narrative. And it is also linked to other questions that I saw in the Q&A, you know, about Silk Roads and narratives and so on. And I saw also some questions about the UNESCO history of Sub-Saharan Africa, about Africa, and is it like, you know, the UNESCO, the project, you know, supported by the UNESCO, you know, the history of the Silk Road and Central Asia, sorry. And so we have the same idea behind, the idea that we need to unite and connect people, south to north, north to south, east to west, west to east. And so we are building narrative, you know, around these very ideas. And we try, you know, during 1 hour to demystify, you know, this idea of Silk Road, and we talk about Silk Roads, you know, plural and so on. But we have also to think about the fact that we don't have only peaceful relationships, and not only silk and gold or nice products, you know, traveled along the Silk Road. We have also the dark side of the Silk Road with the slavery, slave trade between Africa and Arabia, between Africa and Persia, between Africa and India. And we know about this slavery and slave roads. We have also not only human trafficking, but also trade of weapons, you know, and arms, since the Abbasid period and probably the Bronze Age, you know, and until the 19th century, where the Europeans, you know, were selling, you know, guns, you know, to the slave traders, and in Ethiopia or in East Africa. So we have this dark side of the Silk Road history that we shouldn't ignore, because they are part of the identity and the history of the people.
Thank you, Stéphane. I think we're going to have to leave it there because we're a bit over time. But I just wanted to thank our wonderful speakers again for their time and their expertise on this matter. It's a really fascinating conversation. We could go on for several more days, but we'll have to leave it there for the time being. The recording will go up on our social media channels in the coming days, so we can dissect it in more detail then. Before you go, I just wanted to mention a little bit about what's coming up. This exhibition, for those of you who are in London, it's been on Granary Square, the Silk Road Living History exhibition since April. It's just moving this week to a new location, Lewis Cubitt Square, which is very close to the Aga Khan Center, just around the corner from Granary Square, and that will be up until the 1st of September. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, please do come down and take a look. And what else do we have? We've got some more talks coming up. This is just 2. We have a whole other bunch planned, but these ones are the most immediate ones. So please do register for those if of interest. You can do so either through our respective websites or through the Silk Road-livinghistory.org website. We have also some workshops coming up. So if you're interested in Islamic geometry or calligraphy or fantastical birds of the East for that matter, we have a partnership with the Prince's Foundation School of Traditional Arts. And we'll be doing some online courses with them to allow you to go a little bit deeper into the Silk Road heritage. And that's it. So please, you can find it all on the website below. Thank you again to our wonderful speakers. And thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you or engaging with you again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Christopher. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Roland.
Bye. Thank you, participant. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.